Hello, welcome to our third and final National Academy of Construction Ask Me Anything for spring of 2019. My name is Keith Molenaar, and I'm thrilled you could join us today. I'm an NAC member and a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. The National Academy of Construction was established to recognize our industry leaders. An important purpose of the Academy is to provide a network system of linkage between the past and present participants in the construction industry. As such, we've established this NAC AMA to help transfer knowledge to our next generation of construction leaders. The format for our AMA is simple. Speakers will make a short presentation about their careers and their perspective on the industry. After that, we'll ask your questions. So if you've not already, please email your questions to nacama@colorado.edu. At the end of the presentation, one student will win a $500 scholarship, and we'll announce that right at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker today. Margaret, or Maggie Walker, is retired from Dow, and she retired in 2011 as Vice President for Engineering Solutions, Technology Centers, and Manufacturing and Engineering Work Process. During her 36-year career at Dow, she established herself as the leader of one of the finest project delivery organizations in the world. Her career with the company began in 1974 as a research engineer. From 1976 to 1992, she served in many roles in manufacturing operations. 1992 brought about an experience in supply chain. In 1995, she was charged with creating a new business for Dow, Contract Manufacturing Services. She returned to operations in 2001 as Director of Dow Process Automation, Workflow Process, and Learning Manufacturing and Engineering. She took on additional responsibilities in 2003 for Dow's Technology Centers, Process Safety, and Design and Construction. Presently, Maggie is a member of the Board of Directors for Methanex Corporation, serving on the Human Resources and Responsible Care Committees. She's also a member of the Board of Directors for Independent Project Analysis Incorporated, and Maggie serves as a member of the Executive Committee of the National Academy of Construction. She's been honored as a distinguished engineer from her alma mater, Texas Tech University, and she's received the Synthetic Organic Chemical Manufacturers Association's Leadership Award and chaired their Board of Governors. Maggie was also awarded the prestigious Genesis Award by Dow, the company's highest recognition for leadership, and is a recipient of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers Management Division Award. And as I said, she's also a member of the National Academy of Construction. We're really lucky to have her today. She's known for her infectious leadership style, and Maggie's inspired and helped develop those around her, both men and women alike. She's married to Don, and they have 2 sons. At this point, I want to turn it over to Maggie so she can tell you a little bit about her career and her perspective on the industry. But before that, I think she'd like to start off with a safety moment, which is really common in our industry if you haven't been involved with this before.
Thank you, Keith. And thank you everyone for joining in. It's an honor for me to be a part of this, and I really look forward to hearing your questions. My first exposure to safety was actually as a small child, and because my father was a firefighter. So I got exposed to how to get a family plan, how to get out of the house. I also got exposed to what happened when my father came home from work and things hadn't gone so well in the fire. So safety for me has been a passion since I was really very young, working in the chemical industry and then working in the construction end of that chemical industry. Safety is a very important part of what we do. We're constantly working to achieve zero, and we believe that all incidents and accidents are preventable. This month, April, is Distracted Driving Awareness Month. So I thought that might be appropriate for the group that we're just talking to. No matter what your age, young or old, we have a way of being distracted while we're driving. And by the way, that applies to walking as well. Every day, at least 9 Americans die and 100 Americans are injured in distracted driving crashes. Of the over 40,000 people who die, in motor vehicle fatalities in 2018. It was believed that distracted driving contributed quite a bit to that. If you look at workplace incidents, driving, hazardous driving, incidents and fatalities are very much a part of our industry. We're constantly working on that, and it is found that one of the biggest contributors is distracted driving. So my question to you today is, if you could make a difference in one person's life, would you? And what are you willing to do to make that difference? You know, because it was just a quick call. It was really just a short trip. It was just one drink. It was just one picture. It was just one email. It was just one glance at that screen so I could get the right radio station on. It was just a text. It was just the bite of that sandwich that I had to have to get to my class on time. Just is all it takes. So what I'm asking you is, are you willing to just drive to make a difference in someone's life today? And the person's life you've been making the most difference in might be your own. So please consider this as you leave wherever you are, and whether you're walking or driving, try to do that with the focus that we need to have to protect not only ourselves, but each other. So with that, I've been asked to go into a brief scenario of my career and then maybe give an industry perspective. I look forward to your questions, because those actually, I think, will put more depth in whatever I say. I'm pretty old. I'm 67 years old. So when I came out of school in 1994, there weren't that many women in engineering. I was a chemical engineer. I went to work for the Dow Chemical company and found the perfect place to be research. It allowed me to get established. It allowed me to kind of find my way. And I wasn't thrown into the big middle of a huge operating plant or a big mega project. I served in that role for a long time, and well, for a couple of years. And then I moved into manufacturing and in chlorine plants. As part of that, in moving to chlorine, is not only did I learn how to operate chlorine plants, but we actually went through a huge modernization. And part of that modernization was that we were going to build 3 chlorine plants in Freeport, Texas, and they were going to be modernized while we were running, which was kind of a unique way to do something. And they were all going to be the same. Now, for those of you that are thinking about engineering or already studying engineering, you know that engineers kind of hate standards, okay? Because we think that everything's got to be invented. So we were really pushing uphill on that, but we managed to build 3 chlorine plants identical. What that did was allow us to operate those plants the same way. We could transfer or move people around, and it turned out that it saved quite a bit of money on standardized parts and maintenance and things like that. So following that experience in chlorine, I actually left the technical side of my career and went into HR, human resources. The reason for that was that my husband also is an engineer for Dow, and his job forced him to move closer into Houston. We lived in Lake Jackson at the time, which is about an hour-and-a-half drive between each other. And I just kind of felt like that I wasn't sure that I could continue to do the role I'd been doing in manufacturing, although I'd been doing it for a couple of years remotely like that. Anyway, so I went to HR for a while and learned training and development. And what I wanted to also point out is that every experience I had, so please remember, because I'm going to get down the road here in a minute, about the research experience I had, and then I had manufacturing for about 6 or 7 years in there, and then I went into HR and did training and development. Every part of my career, even though it wasn't necessarily planned that way, every piece of it I pulled forward and applied in the next assignment that I received. So while I was in HR, training and development, it was called a pass-through position. They took technical people that had a lot of high potential and they put them in these pass-through jobs. And then in 2 years, you came back into manufacturing. When it was time for me to go back into manufacturing, they offered me a job. It didn't happen to be the job I wanted, because the job I really wanted was to run a plant. And that was what I aspired to do. And so they offered me a job in the tech centers, and I turned that down because I'd done such a good job in HR that they let me go into compensation. So you think, why would you want to go in compensation? Again, I learned a lot about compensation. So when I finally did get offered a job, the superintendent's job I wanted, back in manufacturing, part of what you do as a leader is that you get involved in compensation. And because I already had this background, that was a very easy task for me to do. Following that, I had several other larger manufacturing roles leading them. We also had capital projects developed within those technologies. So I was originally in chlorine, then I went into the epoxy resins area. We built bisphenol plants with new technology. And although I wasn't in the construction side at that point, I sat on project teams that developed those projects. Following that, I went into the supply chain arena. At that point, supply chain was just sort of a new buzzword, and I was able to transfer to Midland, Michigan, and I pursued that career as a supply chain leader. At that point, I also helped to Dow to install SAP into its how it managed the company, and that was a unique experience. Following the supply chain experience, I had some work where I dealt with General Motors around some environmental work that we did there. It was very interesting. And then they were looking for a person that had a unique background to run a business for Dow called Contract Manufacturing Services. That background that they wanted someone with research because it involved pharmaceuticals. They wanted someone with manufacturing background, and they wanted someone that understood the supply chain. And I met those unique criteria. So I ran a business for Dow for about 7 years. We were economically profitable every year, and we grew that business, and finally then it was absorbed into some other businesses. Following that, the Dow Chemical Company had a unique process automation strategy, and that was around process automation. We actually developed our own proprietary process automation. We decided that because of all the technology out in the marketplace, that we wanted to commercialize and go to a commercial platform. They tried to do that several times before and not been successful. And so they looked for somebody like me that had credibility in manufacturing. I'd spent quite a bit of time in a business, so I understood the commercial side of it, had done a lot of negotiations. And so they brought me in to negotiate the big contract with our commercial platform leader to help select that, and then to drive the change that was needed to make that happen, which involved a lot of integration into new and existing capital projects. Following that, I was in process automation then, and process engineering and process safety and the technology center. And then there was another reorganization within Dow, and it was decided that I could then add into all of that the detailed design and construction of the whole engineering organization. So what that gave me is from start to finish, from the smallest capital project to the largest capital project, including our JVs, off balance sheet. So from 0 to $30 billion capital projects, that was the organization that I ran. And we delivered globally around the world, and we were quite successful, and we stayed at the top of the benchmarked organizations that deliver those projects at the top and delivering the highest return on our investments for about 10 years. So that's my career in a nutshell. I hope that was enough of a nutshell, Keith. I'm looking at you nodding. I hope that was okay.
Oh, yeah.
So now my perspective on the industry is that I spent the last 7 to 10 years really involved in big projects. And what was occurring at that time is that it used to be that an engineer had, you could do smaller projects, medium-sized projects, large projects, and then you maybe had a mega project. Projects during my tenure got very large, giga projects, like you were starting up 30 or 40 units at the same time. And so one of the things in industry today, and I'm speaking again from industrial, but even if you look at what's happening like with structural buildings and things like that, that everybody wants to be taller and bigger. And so the industry is looking at how does it continue to develop the capabilities for people to deliver on bigger and bigger projects. because of the oil collapse, actually that had an unintended consequence that was a good thing, and that it created some more small projects. I think that this industry is challenging. There's room for new technology. Robotics have been used somewhat. It continue to be used, modular. So there's a lot of technology, but the industry is pretty disjointed, if you will, sometimes, because we sometimes can't all get aligned. So in the industry, you have owners, you have constructors, you have engineers, you have architects, and sometimes getting all those people to come together and agree on one direction to go is challenging. And that's kind of where I think we are today. I think we have great opportunities to bring that forth. My perspective on the industry is that we have to work on our safety. No one is going to want their offspring, their child, to go work in construction if in fact we have such high fatality rates. And so that's a big issue for the construction industry today. Again, the demographics are very challenging, but if you look globally, the demographics are still challenging, because you have a lot of needs for all the building in all the world, but you don't necessarily, on any given construction site, you may have 6 or 7 different cultures, 10 or 15 different languages being spoken, and so it makes for a complexity. But it also makes for an interesting challenge on how you bring all those unique cultures together and put them against one outcome. My last perspective would be is that, you know, I've been in research, which is where you work on something and then, you know, there's this long wait time before you see if it's successful or not. And then I've been in manufacturing, where you literally put something in the front end and it has to come out the back end pretty quickly. And I've been in construction, and in construction, it's sort of in between those two, because construction requires so much on pre-planning and really scope setting and knowing what you want to do. Any kind of scope change later causes you problems. But if you do your front end load in your early stage correctly, then you can end up with a wonderful product. But that outcome may be several years down the road, but a lot of that front end investment makes a difference. And so to me, it's like a wonderful blend of really where you can engage, you can see what benefits come from hard work in the front and understanding. And it's also an industry that requires a huge amount of what I would call negotiating and trade-offs and understanding what those are. And you work with the business, you work with research if there's new technology, you work with supply chain, logistics. You know, all these different engineering factions come together to deliver a capital project and get it on the ground safely, on schedule, and on budget. So with that, I hope I've incentivized some questions, and I'll pause now and let Keith take over.
Great, Maggie. Thank you so much. You've really given us a great perspective on your career and the industry. We have about 65 questions so far. Some came in before you started that, and they really align with what your discussion was, and they keep coming in, fewer to clarify. But generally, they're kind of falling into questions about the industry, questions about your career, and then questions about advice that some of our participants are seeking. So why don't I start with just a few general industry questions. So what's the biggest challenge you've faced in the construction industry? And that's a question from Grace Allen. So what's the biggest challenge that you've faced in the construction industry?
Well, the biggest challenge that I think I've faced has been when you're looking at a huge project. Let's say I'm wanting to do a very large project. The biggest challenge is that there's multiple businesses involved, and a lot of times there's multiple partners. So, you know, there'd be like a Dow and Exxon and a Saudi Aramco, right? So you've got 2 or 3 partners involved. And so the biggest challenge really is getting people together to really agree on what that scope is and what you want to do and how you want to do it. You know, we joke about that there's a trade-off between cost and schedule, but invariably you'll hear people say, well, it's got to be delivered right now, but I want it for the best possible price. And so you really have to keep talking and discussing and you know, collaborating around what does this really look like and what do you really want to see? And you need to ask enough questions where you're certain that once you get this built, there's really going to be somewhere to if it's a building, you want it to fill up. If it's a plant, you want it to be operating. So to me, that's the biggest challenge I face, is really is bringing those factions together and letting them know that they really are factions, and that's okay, because it is that conflict that really allows you to excel. I look at conflict like pearls. I happen to love pearls, and a pearl is just a grain of sand that's really annoying an oyster. So, but something really good came out of it. So I view conflict and resolution of conflict as a real opportunity, but also a challenge, because you have to keep your eye on the ball when you're doing that.
Outstanding. Great answer. Dylan Mueller has a question a little bit bigger, more general. Where do you see the construction industry 10 years from now, and how much will technology have to do to impact it?
Oh gosh, well that's a question that several people would like to hear my answer to. And if I had the answer, I could be, I don't know what I'd be doing, but if I had the answer, I'd be really happy. Okay. Several years ago, I'll tell you that this is a sort of an interesting story. I got pulled together with a group of people from Dow, and we were there was 20 of us, and we were supposed to project where Dow was going to be in 10 years. And I remember going through that process, and I remember thinking, oh, I was way too crazy on where I thought they could go. And of course, then what they did, they went and merged with DuPont, which I never thought they would do. Anyway, but the construction industry, I think in 10 years will be, I would hope, more automated. I would hope you would see more robotics. I think you'll see more use of drones to, figure out where things are. And I'm gonna, you're gonna feel like I'm a broken record, because I really am. The whole planning process around a project and the safety of a project, I think, can be positively influenced by drones flying around and seeing where things are. And are we working over somebody else? Or, do we not have the proper safety equipment on? Or did we not design the construction process such that we could protect people? I do believe that I have great faith that in the next 10 years we will have improved the safety performance of the industry, and therefore we'll have more people coming the direction of construction. I think that you're also going to find that there's a lot of discussion about, now I don't know how many of you are paying attention to this, but there's operating system, they coined that phrase, operating system 1 versus operating system 2. I personally think that's going to go away, and it's really much to do about nothing, so to speak, as Shakespeare might say. And I think that what will come of that is that we'll basically understand that there's good practices on how you do projects, and that people will figure out that you can get better returns. I would hope that you would have more, like I said, more technology, not just the things I mentioned, but like the use of artificial intelligence. I hesitate to even say that word, because machine learning, artificial intelligence, all that gets crazy, but I think there's going to be a huge step change in that before. And what I mean by that is, like, if I have something a job I'm fixing to do, that actually there can be something right there with me, so that if I have a question, I can go back to the person that designed it, right, and ask them, like, what did you intend with this? And, where do you see the hazards and stuff like that happening? And what should I be careful of? And eliminating struck by and pinched in and all that kind of stuff, movements. So that would be where I see it going. I really think it's just going to really open up in 10 years. But that's because other things are opening up. In other words, if we make progress in blockchain and AI, you'll have a better contracting process, so it won't take so long to sign the contracts, because I can get those signed. I can immediately get just the logistics of all that communication will be much easier, so that when there's a change, that everybody knows about it, because those are the places where we get confused and people get hurt. So hopefully that helped a little bit.
Yeah, it does. There's a number of themes around robotics in construction, and I'd be curious with your um, experience from automation, process automation in the plants that you worked on. Do you see more robotics coming forward in construction processes as well, or are they too unique and specific?
Well, actually, already today, there's robotics being used in construction. Uh, and specifically the thing that I'll talk about is like vessel inspection. Okay, so a lot of times you have greenfield, a lot of times you don't have greenfield. And either way, even if you're building a new tower, you've got to inspect it. And you can get these little robots and they go inside and they do all the inspection. So you don't have to send a person in to inspect the welds and all that stuff that was going on. So yeah, I think there's already examples of robotics being used in construction today. And it's just a matter of, who's going to pay for it, right? So it always, I hate to say this, but you got to follow the money. And at some point, the owner or the developer has to agree that they want the contractor in construction and the engineering firm and the architectural firm to invest in these things. We've been doing modular for a long time, and modular is usually something that's in more confined area so that you can set up robotics. I mean, we have automotive, building structural steel can have applications there. So anyway, yeah.
Great, yeah, thank you. Here's the last question about the kind of industry trends. Bryce Dew asked the question, what's been the best innovation for the green construction business, and how did it change the game, so to speak?
Oh, okay. This would be Stump the Chump. Let me think. Oh gosh. I didn't build buildings. I built chemical plants. Okay. And when we build chemical plants, you have a few buildings, but not many, because you normally, when you have somebody else build the building, and I built one building in China, so that is true. I did build a building. But what was the greatest? That's what I was trying to think. I mean, I think the whole concept of lean was a good one, where where just in general there's certification so that people knew what they were supposed to be doing, and you then had some foundational work to come from. I think that to me, just having the actual concept of having the facilities and have a foundational way to come from is probably the biggest thing I think that changed, because once that happened, then people sort of got on the bandwagon, and you wanted to be that rated. Your building was rated, and you could get more money for that building for that point. From a chemical engineering standpoint, the plants we build, the biggest breakthrough was just that people stopped thinking about green as being expensive, but rather how was that going to make a difference in your yield, or make a difference in your efficiency, or how could you do it with less energy? Okay.
Right.
And all of a sudden things became more economical, and it drove those concepts.
Great. Let's there's a number of questions just about your personal experience and your motivation. So here's one from Bryce. What were some of your ambitions in early life or college that drove you to the success you've achieved?
I from the time, okay, when I was 12 years old, this is a true story, gosh. My mother was putting my hair up in a ponytail, and so she was just having a conversation with me, and she said, and neither of my parents graduated from college. They went 3.5 years each, and then they had me, so we know why they didn't graduate. Anyway, and she would say to me, what do you want to do? And I would say, when I was 12 years old, I literally told her this. I said, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a technical degree, and I'm going to graduate, and then I'm going to get married, and I'm going to make a difference. And so when I was in high school, I was good in math and science. And I think I shared this with Keith, I can't remember, but an engineer from a company that I shall not mention came to my geometry class and said, was giving this presentation. And remember, this was in the late 60s. So the geometry teacher said, you need to ask the question, or you're going to get extra homework. And I had a lot of already stuff I had to do, and I didn't want extra homework. So I raised my hand and I said, I noticed there were no women in the picture up there. And then they said, Well, of course not, because, women would just be put in an office building and all they would do is calculations if they chose to become an engineer, and that would just be the dumbest thing you could ever do. So I always have to thank that engineer. I really do thank him, because without that, I always liked sort of a challenge. And so if you tell me there's something I really can't do, I probably will do it. Now, what was interesting was that I got a job with the Dow Chemical Company, which again was exactly what I needed to be doing. But when I looked at my career, all I ever wanted to be was the best engineer ever. That was all I really wanted. And that was probably my total desire for my first 6 years. And then I figured out, well, I could probably be superintendent, okay? And then I achieved that goal. And then all I wanted to be was the very best superintendent I could ever be. And then one day in a parking lot, one of the guys that I was working with, he was, I don't know, he was 5 or 10 years older than I was. He basically pulled me aside and he said, you're aiming too low. You could be general manager here in Freeport, right? And I went, wow, I never thought about that. And I never got to be the general manager in Freeport because I became a business director, right? So my life sort of changed around, but I really never thought I'd be a VP. But I just always sort of looked at the challenges I was given and done them as best I could do them. Now, I have to tell you that because I'm a female, that I felt I carried an extra burden. And I'll also tell you, based upon feedback from my male counterparts and male bosses, that I was held to a higher standard. And I refused to make it, it was going to be easier for any other men or women that came behind me. And because I was going to do the very best I could, no matter what that job was. So that's kind of how I did it. I'm pleased with how that ended up. It ended up well. Yeah.
Well, you certainly have opened some doors up. I know at the University of Colorado, our freshman class this year was over 40% female. So we're getting close to gender equity, and I'm really proud of that and looking forward to the future there as well. A question about your educational background from Matthew, and was it necessary to become a vice president, or I suppose what additional things beyond engineering did you need for your education to be a vice president and a leader of the organization?
Again, remember, I'm sort of a dinosaur now because I worked for the same company for a long, long time. And most people will not do that. That's not what they do. That they work for different companies and then they get their promotions in those moves. So what I'm going to say to you is that you really need to figure out what it is that where you're aspiring to be and what that requires to get there. And you can do that by looking at Glassdoor or Glass Ceiling or whatever that is, or LinkedIn, and look at people's career paths. But in my particular case, Dow was extraordinarily good at training and developing. And so I was put on a business team while I was the superintendent of my first superintendent's job. I was actually on a business team. And as part of that, I got training on how to run a business. And then I went on a larger business team, if you will. And so Dow did a lot of training. And then we had opportunities to go away for like 3 months, and Dow paid for you to get like a accelerated MBA kind of thing, okay? But a lot of folks today will decide that they want to go ahead and get their master's degree in MBA or master's degree in finance or whatever it is they'd like to get a master's degree in. The guys working for me in process automation, a lot of them had PhDs. The guys working for me in the business I ran, a lot of them were PhD organic chemists. So there is a room for advanced degrees. In my particular case, it just never quite fit the model. But what I did was I did development stuff that was within Dow and then that was offered by Dow. Yeah. Great.
Well, if you don't mind, let's kind of move on to some advice that our participants are seeking here. One is a great question here from Jolene. If you knew then what you know now, would you still make the same career choices?
Oh, Jolene. Okay. First of all, I decided a long time ago that I have no regrets and I would change nothing. Okay. Now, why is that? Because I'm one of those people that believes that if one little thing changes, then something else would change. So I've been happily married to, well, at least most of the years, happily married to my husband of 44 years this year. And I have two lovely children, 37 and 33, that I'm, just, think they hung the moon. And so if I had anything I would do differently, that might not have happened. So I really don't ever look back and say, woulda, coulda, shoulda. What I do though is, which is very important for me, is that I believe that everything is a learning opportunity. Everything is a learning opportunity. So if I remember one time right after I hired in at Dow, they had this, I didn't know that they were showing me off. I had no idea because again, I was oblivious to all this. And so there was this big guys came down from corporate and they were going to come in and I was going to make this presentation. And I was dressed totally inappropriately for a professional presentation. Totally. I mean, just totally. And I think back on that now and I just go, what an idiot. But you know what? I lived through it. I learned. And the next time I knew exactly what to do. So I wear, jeans and a work shirt when I go to the mag sales. And when a corporate guy comes in, I have my, my silk on. So, you learn from it and you go. And that's kind of how I view life, is that, you learn and go. I will also tell you that as a young engineer, it was hard. I'm not going to act like it wasn't. You're the only woman. In fact, very few people know this, but I'll share it with this group and then more people will know it. Before the book, 50 Shades of Grey, I had the title 50 Men and Me. And the reason was because everywhere I went, that's all there was men. And it was very hard just to kind of survive. And so I developed some coping mechanisms that were pretty defensive in nature and probably not, the best coping mechanisms to deal with conflict or anything else. But as I aged and got up in different situations, I figured out that, wow, maybe I could do it a little differently and have a different outcome. And so that learning, that taking learning away from every experience that you have is something that's, I would just tell you, that's what you have to do. So I really don't look back and say what I would have done differently. I go back and I say, oh, I learned from this. I take tennis because I like tennis right now. That's what I'm doing as part of my retirement. And on the tennis court, I will learn things that directly apply to my board positions. And I take it back into the boardroom. And so I learn everywhere. So anyway, just be open to learning and always be willing to say, what was my part? Because if there's an issue, there's always two sides to it and you have a contribution to that, and be willing to see that and then learn from it and move on. And then don't hold on to the past, because the past is gone. The future's not here yet. And all you got's right now, what you're living at this very moment. So that's kind of what I feel about it.
That's great advice. Let me just ask one more question about being a woman in a male-dominated industry then, if I could. I mean, a number of questions came in. Kendall, Kristen, Natalie have all asked similar questions. I kind of like Natalie's because she's asking, what advice would you give future female leaders in the construction industry? So females who want to, not just partake, but be leaders in the industry.
Yeah. I think that it's now this is where I get to the part about men and women. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything holding anybody back these days. Nothing. There's no barrier but yourself. So if you want to be a good leader in construction, then be a good leader in construction. And when I graduated from college, my friend, her father was a production foreman at a chemical plant, and he pulled me aside and he said, I'm going to tell you that you're going into a pretty foreign world there, and it's going to be hard, but just listen to the people that are there, respect the people that are there. The operators have been there a long time. and just respect that. And then my father pulled me aside and said, I know this is what you want to do, but I really never thought you'd do it. And so I better warn you that there's politics everywhere. Remember that. And so what I would tell you is that, you know, in the construction industry, it's no different. Is that, gee, there's a lot of people who've been around the block a lot, and you need to listen and learn from them. And there's also some politics. So there's going to be people that want you to be successful and people that don't want you to be successful. There's also going to be, you know, you just figure out who's the decision maker, right? So I would say to be a good leader, take care of people, you know, be trustworthy and you know, ethical, and again, make it where people will follow you into the fire. They won't push you in. That's kind of my leadership style, is that I want people to know I was there because I made a difference in their lives, as in the construction industry, right? And so I take a lot of time to get to know people. And I think that's the same thing you do today. It's that it's no different for men or women. It's just you go in and you lead an organization, and when you're wrong, you say you're wrong and you move on, and you thank people for helping you get through it. And in fact, that's probably the other thing, is that to be successful in construction, you have to give credit away. You have to give it away. If you hold on to it, you're not going to have, the teams aren't going to want you to work with them or anything else. So you need to understand that it literally takes a lot of different entities to make these projects successful, and you need to recognize that to be a successful leader. So I really, a woman came up to me today, and she's the other day I was doing a thing at Texas A&M, and she came up and she said, do you think women can manage in construction? I said, oh yeah, I think this is, again, men and women. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's just a prime time.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. You actually, I was going to ask Abigail's question, but it was, what are the key qualities of a leader? And I think you just addressed that, and they're agnostic there for sure. Mm-hmm. So good. Sarah asked a question about, do you recommend obtaining experience abroad? You said you've worked on international projects, and so it's,
yeah. Yes, if you can, this day and age, I really think that would be a very good thing to do. You know, in my particular case, I was, people were working for me, and we were building projects abroad. We had projects in Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, China, Singapore, the Middle East, all over in the Middle East, Europe, Canada, none in Mexico, several in South America. So we're very global, right? And every one of those places is very different on how teams work together. I mean, there's some things that are common about how teams work together, but what I'm saying is, in the cultural form of it, you kind of have to figure out how that works, just like within every company. And you know, sometimes there's trade issues, right? You have to learn to deal with. There's you know, the fact that half the team is from US and the other half's from all over the world, and how those people connect back with family, the time change, you know, are you all staying, you know, where do you live for engineering? I mean, there's a whole bunch of neat things that you have to learn to deal with when you're abroad on a capital project. So I do recommend that if you can have that experience, and if it gives you, you know, you can figure out how to make it happen, that it's a very important, very important.
Great. Jamie asked a question about experience like that outside of education a little bit. Would you please speak about any internships or co-ops that you may have had, or if you haven't, just generally with the people you've hired and people you've worked with, what's the value of co-ops and internships?
I will have to tell you that I did not have the opportunity for co-op and internship because we didn't have a lot of money. So my mother worked for the phone company, and I worked every summer, spring break, weekend that I wasn't at school. I was working at the phone company, and I thank them for every minute of that, because that allowed me to help get myself through school. But since that time, I really have worked hard to make intern and co-op assignments valuable. I think they're what is that MasterCard commercial? It's priceless. They're priceless. and you should definitely make time for it. I think it gives you an advantage in hiring. You know more about the corporation that you're going to work with, or about the corporation you don't want to go to work with. You've actually experienced hands-on delivery of engineering and construction projects. You will network, you'll meet people, you'll meet other interns from and co-ops from other locations. And in this day and age, networking is very important, because remember I said, I'm this dinosaur, you're going to change jobs, okay? And so even people that you meet during your co-oping and internship are starting to build that network that you need to have to be successful and to really end up where you want to be in your career. So yes, I totally value it, and I would suggest that you know, as you're looking at who you work for, that you look at what type of projects they put you on. Obviously, if it's an intern, it's your first one, it's going to be something very, you know, straightforward. You know, if it's your third internship, it might be more complex. And I know some universities are more or less supportive of that, but I definitely would have that as, if they don't do co-ops, then for sure do internships. And it's a very important part today of being competitive in the marketplace.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maggie. We're down to about 4 or 5 minutes left, so I'd like to try and squeeze in just 1 or 2 more questions, if we could. Valerie Rico asked one I think that you can relate to here. What advice could you give a first-generation college student getting a degree in construction?
I think my advice would be, because I was a first generation, not getting a degree in construction, but chemical engineering, is talk to as many people you can, learn as much as you can, talk to professors, talk to people in the industry, shadow people, learn as much as you can about the construction industry, and where you might want to be, because again, construction is very diverse. You know, it's just very diverse. You've got construction that's government related, infrastructure related, buildings, chemical plants, refineries, E&P drilling. I mean, you've got all kinds of construction. It's just a gambit of, you know, there's so many different things. And if you're first generation, then just go meet people and ask questions. And I'm going to tell you a secret about that, is that if you go in, remember you're thinking, well, I'm going to get so much out of this conversation and they're not going to get anything out of talking to me. They will. They'll get tremendous out of talking to you. So remember, you will be offering something to people. When you walk in and say, I'd like to set up some time with you, could I talk to you just about the construction industry? People love talking about themselves, and they like talking about the industry they're in. But remember, they want to know about you too, because the construction industry is very competitive to get people that want to be in construction. So they want to know what's making you tick. They want to know how you're going to make your decision. So remember that when you cold call somebody and ask to talk to them, or you go talk to a professor, you're going to get something out of that, and that's going to give you an idea to go talk to somebody else. And so if you see what I'm saying, you're kind of hopping around, talking to various people, and you're learning all this stuff that someone whose parents or grandparents were also construction engineers might already know, but actually you'll be advantaged because you've had to make those calls, you've had to go have those conversations, and you've built your network. Okay, so congratulations, and I look forward to hearing about your success.
Yeah, excellent advice. Well, Maggie, I'm going to say a few thank yous here, and then give you a chance to say a few words to close it out, and then I'll announce our winner of our NAC scholarship. So I'd very much like to thank the National Academy of Construction, Wayne Crew for supporting this, and Sandy Pittman for helping organize and issuing the scholarships. I'd also like to thank Jane Song here at the University of Colorado for making all the technology work for us. And I'd like to thank you, Maggie, for giving your time today, and really just some excellent advice. So if you'd like to say a few words in closing, I'll go ahead and announce the scholarship winner after that.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to be sure I thank everybody here for attending, and Jane and Keith for setting this up. It was great. And of course, the NAC for making this all possible. But I want y'all to know that I would not be before you today in any way, shape, or form without huge support from so many people, some of which I couldn't name them. There's hundreds my parents, my grandparents, teachers, co-workers. So I feel like that I owe a lot of gratitude to everybody around me for making me who I am. And this webcast is making me a better person. So I just want to thank everybody for the great questions, and they really were thought-provoking, and I appreciate that opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again. So I think you'll be happy to hear we randomly selected our winner, and the winner is from Texas. So
I had nothing to do with it. My hands were in the box. I had nothing to do with it.
But Eric Beeson from Tyler Junior College is our scholarship winner. So congratulations, Eric. We'll be in contact with you via email to get you your scholarship. So again, thank you everyone for attending. This is our last AMA for the spring, but we'll make announcements again for the fall semester when we do it again. So thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.